You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone dances with the Grim Reaper. That was Robert Alton Harris, born in 1953. Harris grew up in a troubled home environment marked by abuse and instability. This tumultuous upbringing led him down a path of escalating criminal behavior. In 1978, Harris and his brother Daniel crossed a line from which there was no return. They kidnapped two teenage boys, Michael Baker and John Majewski, who were merely 16 years old, in San Diego. After commandeering the boys' vehicle to use in a bank robbery, Harris and his brother drove them to a remote area. There, in a cold and calculated act, Robert Harris murdered both teenagers to prevent them from identifying him later. Following the murders, the Harris brothers proceeded to rob a bank, but their freedom was short-lived as they were apprehended by the police the same day. The trial that followed was a high-profile affair, largely due to the brutal nature of the crimes. Robert Harris was found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping. Despite his initial attempts to deny the allegations, the evidence against him was compelling and ultimately led to his conviction. His sentencing also marked a significant moment in California's legal history. In 1992, Harris was executed in the gas chamber at San Quentin State Prison. This execution was particularly notable as it was the first to occur in California in 25 years, signaling a temporary reinstatement of capital punishment in the state. Harris's last moments were marked by a peculiar mix of defiance and acceptance. His final meal, a combination of pizza, fried chicken, and ice cream, was a simple pleasure before facing his grim fate. His last words, which he spoke just before his execution, left a lasting impression, reflecting a mix of personal reflection and broader commentary on the nature of life and death. First-degree murder is statistically the crime that has been given the death sentence most often, but the crime Robert committed isn't even close to the level of the anarchists and the bombing of Haymarket Square. George Engel was a part of this bombing, and his last words were, "Hurrah for anarchy! This is the happiest moment of my life." George Engel's life and eventual fate are emblematic of the profound tensions and harsh realities of the late 19th century labor movement in America. Born in 1836 in Kassel, Germany, into a poor family, Engel experienced hardship almost from the outset. The death of his father left him effectively orphaned at the tender age of 1, a stark beginning that would shape his outlook and future actions. Growing up in such dire circumstances, Engel was compelled to enter the workforce early, becoming an apprentice to a shoemaker at just 14 years old. His early entry into the labor force was not just a bid for survival, but also the start of his lifelong commitment to the working class. Despite his efforts, the limited opportunities in Germany felt constricting, prompting Engel to seek a new life in the United States. Arriving in Philadelphia, he initially worked in a sugar refinery, a job that was both physically demanding and poorly paid. This experience further solidified his resolve to fight for workers' rights. Engel eventually moved to Chicago, which at the time was a burgeoning hub for the American labor movement. It was there, against a backdrop of growing labor unrest and increasing clashes with authorities, that he became deeply involved in the anarchist movement. His activism was driven by a desire to improve the plight of workers and challenge the entrenched power structures of the day. The pivotal moment in Engel's life came with the Haymarket Affair in 1886. During a rally supporting striking workers, a bomb was thrown at police, leading to a violent confrontation. Engel, who had attended a planning meeting but was not present at the rally, was nonetheless arrested and tried alongside other leading anarchists. The trial was widely criticized for its lack of fairness and for being more about silencing dissent than serving justice. Convicted of conspiracy, Engel and his co-defendants were sentenced to death. His time in prison did not dampen his spirit. If anything, it strengthened his convictions. Engel went to the gallows resolutely, viewing his execution as a martyrdom for the cause of labor and anarchy. His final words, "Hurrah for anarchy! This is the happiest moment of my life," were emblematic of his unyielding commitment to his ideals. Engel's execution on November 11, 1887, was not just the culmination of his own life, but a significant moment in the history of labor rights in America. His story is a poignant reminder of the struggles faced by early labor activists and the extreme sacrifices they made in the fight for fair working conditions and social justice. His legacy, though rooted in a specific historical and political context, continues to resonate as a symbol of resistance against oppression. Most people on death row beg for their lives. That is not how the story of James Lewis Jackson, who actually not only begged for death, but was itching for it, unfolded. James Lewis Jackson's last words were, "Warden, murder me. I'm ready to roll. Time to get this party started." James Lewis Jackson, often referred to as Big Jack due to his imposing stature, became a notorious figure in 1997 when he was convicted of the grievous crime of murdering his two stepdaughters, Erica and Sanseria. This tragic event unfolded amid a tumultuous family situation, as the girl's mother was attempting to leave Jackson, a decision that precipitated a violent outburst from him. The family's domestic strife turned lethal when Jackson, in a fit of rage exacerbated by the impending breakup, murdered the two girls. The situation escalated further when he also attacked their mother, adding to the already grave scenario. When it came time for his trial and subsequent punishment, Jackson displayed a chilling calmness, contrasting sharply with the brutality of his actions. His demeanor in court was marked by occasional smiles to friends and family, showing a complex mixture of emotions during what was a highly charged situation. Jackson's criminal history painted a picture of a man familiar with violence. He had previously served time for an assault involving a firearm. This backdrop of earlier aggressive behavior added a layer of inevitability to his violent actions against his family. Furthermore, a note discovered by the police after the murders suggested a man in turmoil. Jackson wrote of his failure to care for his family and spoke of giving them to God, a statement he later claimed was misunderstood by others. During the trial, the jury was quick to reach a verdict, likely influenced by Jackson's initial admission of guilt to the police, despite his later insistence on his innocence in court. The evidence and his own contradictory statements sealed his fate, leading to a conviction and a sentence that reflected the severity of his crimes. The case of James Lewis Jackson serves as a grim reminder of the destructive impact of domestic violence and the tragic outcomes that can arise from volatile personal relationships, compounded by previous tendencies toward violence. His story is marked by regret, misunderstood intentions, and a final devastating act that would end in severe legal repercussions and lasting emotional scars for all involved. James and Robert used their last words to get across a message to the public in a poetic manner. However, some people are so overwhelmed they use jokes as their last words. One of these people is Patrick Bryan Knight, whose story sounds like it comes out of a crime novel. He said, "Not all of us are innocent, but those are. I said I was going to tell a joke. Death has set me free. That's the biggest joke. I deserve this. And the other joke is that I am not Patrick Bryan Knight, and you all can't stop this execution now. Go ahead. I'm finished." Before we dive into the grim saga of Patrick Bryan Knight, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below about what you find most intriguing in this video. Your engagement is crucial as it supports me in creating more compelling content like this. Patrick Knight's name is forever linked with a horrifying crime that unfolded in a quiet Amarillo, Texas neighborhood. Alongside his accomplice, Robert Bradfield, Knight crossed a moral boundary from which there was no return. Their victims, Walter and Mary Werner, weren't just neighbors. They were the unfortunate targets of a brutal plot. The Werners' nightmare began with a terrifying home invasion and ended beside a lonely road, their lives cruelly snatched away in a desolate ditch. That night, Knight's actions were merciless, stripping away any semblance of humanity. After committing these atrocious acts, he disturbingly went to sleep, his conscience seemingly unscathed by the horrors he had enacted. When justice finally caught up with him, Knight's own confession unveiled the grim details of his crime. While Bradfield received a life sentence, Knight was sentenced to death, facing the sternest punishment possible. His final meal was modest: fried pork chops, chicken, garlic toast, and ice cream. However, his last words resonated with a strange blend of defiance, acceptance, and unexpected humor. In his final moments, Knight reflected on his life and used his platform to advocate for fellow inmates he believed were wrongfully convicted. At age 39, Knight met his end, not with dramatics, but with the quiet finality of lethal injection. If you found this video interesting and want to see more last words, watch these videos on horrifying pilots' last words before crashing.